Have you ever looked at a medical X-ray?
Oh, sure. Yeah, plenty of times.
Right. So you go into the doctor's office, maybe you took a bad fall or something, and they slap this black and white image up
Mm.
on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this expectation of just like absolute uncompromising precision. The doctor points to a jagged white line on your tibia and says, there it is, broken.
Yeah, it's highly objective. I mean, you're looking at a completely binary reality right there. It is either fractured or it is intact. There's no middle ground.
Exactly. True or false.
Yeah.
On or off. And it's clean, it's undeniable. And honestly, if you're the one sitting on the crinkly paper of that examination table, it's incredibly comforting.
Right, we like certainty.
We do. We like things to be visible. We really like reality to be categorized and to just, fit neatly into the rules of physics and biology that we've all been taught since grade school.
Of course. It makes the world predictable.
But, and this is where we're going today, what happens if you step outside of that specific framework?
Well, things get very complicated.
Because if you take that exact same, unbroken faith in empirical observable data and you apply it to certain alternative systems of understanding reality, suddenly that X-ray machine feels, fundamentally inadequate.
Yeah, it becomes a very, very limited lens to view the world through.
Right. So for you listening right now, I want you to just suspend your disbelief for a moment. We are going to consider a massive paradigm-shifting question today.
A really fascinating one.
What if the scientific method we all revere, the one based entirely on what we can measure, test, and observe in the physical world, what if that isn't the only valid way to investigate reality?
Which is a huge what if.
It is. What if there is an entirely different thought system out there, one that treats the metaphysical, the unseen stuff, as a measurable, observable, and completely necessary part of nature?
And that is exactly the ambitious territory we are exploring in this deep dive today.
I'm so excited for this.
Me too. So, our grounding material today is a text called Introducing African Science, Systematic and Philosophical Approach by Dr. Jonathan O. Chimacunum.
Such a dense, incredible book.
It really is. And I want to be super clear right off the bat here, just to set the stage. This is not, it's not an anthropological study of folklore.
Right. It's not a collection of cultural myths or something.
Exactly. This is a rigorous, highly academic proposal for the systematization of a uniquely African brand of science.
A literal scientific framework.
Yes. It's a dense philosophical text that argues African science has its own internal logic, its own causality, and crucially, its own experimental methods.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I feel like to a lot of people, just the phrase African science might sound like almost like an oxymoron if they are strictly married to the Western definition of what science actually is.
Oh, absolutely. It challenges the very definition of the word.
Right. So our mission today is to figure out exactly how this system differs from Western science. We're going to explore this wild concept of a three-valued logic, which broke my brain a little bit.
Oh, we will definitely get into that. It's a trip.
And we're going to see how it completely redefines concepts we thought were totally settled. Things like empty space, matter, antimatter, and like how we even define a scientific truth in the first place.
And as we go through this, I think it's important to establish a crucial ground rule for us and for you listening at home.
Oh yeah, good point.
Our goal here is to impartially explore the ideas presented in this text. We are not here to validate African science by checking it against Western standards.
Right, we aren't grading it.
No, not at all. Nor are we here to tear down Western science. We are simply stepping into a new framework to understand it purely on its own terms.
Taking the author's arguments at face value to see how the system works.
Exactly. We have to look at the internal logic the author presents and just see how the pieces fit together.
I love that. Let's leave our preconceptions at the door. But right out of the gate, there's this giant elephant in the room that we really have to address.
Let's hear it.
Why do we even need a separate category called African science? I mean, isn't gravity just gravity, whether you're in London or Lagos?
That is the most common critique, yeah.
Like, why is this geographic or cultural distinction even necessary for physics?
That's actually the perfect place to start. So the author argues that Western science has drawn a very hard, very arbitrary line in the sand regarding what is real.
Okay.
It restricts itself exclusively to the physical world. If you can't test it empirically, if you can't demonstrate it physically, Western science says it essentially doesn't exist.
Or at least that it's not worthy of scientific inquiry.
Right. African science, however, operates from a worldview that encompasses all shades of reality.
So it's a wider net.
Much wider. It includes the physical, yes, but it intimately involves the metaphysical.
Unseen forces.
Yes, the spiritual, the subnatural. But, and this is a big but, the only caveat is that these metaphysical elements must offer rational explanations for how reality actually works.
They can't just be arbitrary magic.
Exactly.
But I mean, the moment you bring the metaphysical into a modern laboratory, traditionally trained scientists are just going to throw their hands up and walk out.
Oh, they do. Routinely. And the text uses this brilliant, deeply resonant analogy to explain the friction this creates.
Oh, the rooster analogy.
Yes, the one-cock crowing dilemma.
I remember reading this part. It was so evocative. Walk us through it.
So imagine a traditional animal kingdom where, by deep-seated custom, only one cock is allowed to crow.
Okay, setting scene.
It's been this way for generations. The animals are totally used to hearing just one voice announce the dawn every single morning.
Right.
Now, imagine a day when a second cock from a completely different lineage suddenly puffs out its chest and crows.
The audacity.
Right. The reaction from the community isn't just anger, it's existential shock, it's total disbelief.
Because it breaks the fundamental rule of their reality.
Exactly. The dominant system is so accustomed to being the absolute only valid voice that it literally cannot comprehend the legitimacy of an alternative.
So in this scenario, Western science is the dominant cock crowing.
Precisely. Western science has been the only recognized voice of empirical truth globally for centuries.
Wow. Okay, I see where this is going.
So when an African scientific framework presents a different methodology, one that includes the metaphysical, it isn't engaged with on its philosophical merits.
It's just dismissed.
Completely. It is immediately dismissed as magic or voodoo or mythology simply because it doesn't sound like the crowing the world is used to hearing.
That makes total sense from a sociological standpoint, sure. I mean, it's tough being the new kid on the block with a radical new idea.
It is.
But the text doesn't just ask for a seat at the table out of, like, fairness or diversity, right? It actually lays out 3 urgent, highly practical justifications for why the world, and specifically Africa, needs this alternative science to be recognized.
Yes, it goes way beyond just a plea for inclusion. It's a very forceful argument for necessity.
Let's hit those 3 justifications.
So the first justification centers on the African intellect itself.
Okay.
The argument is that African intellectuals desperately need a science that aligns with their native algorithmic logic if they are ever going to truly invent and theorize at their highest potential.
Okay, I want to pause here because this specific point really struck me.
It's a powerful idea.
I'm thinking about you, the listener, who might say work in tech or engineering. Let's say you are trained in a specific coding language, like Python,
Good analogy.
but your company suddenly forces you to build an entire massive database using a completely different, totally clunky language that you just don't intuitively grasp.
Right, it's not native to how you think.
Exactly. You might eventually build the database, sure, but it's going to be a massive struggle. You aren't going to innovate. You aren't going to find elegant solutions.
No, you're just trying to survive the parameters you've been given.
Exactly.
That's a highly accurate way to look at what the author is saying. The text argues that when an African scientist is forced to operate entirely within the Western empirical thought system, they suffer from a kind of cognitive alienation.
Cognitive alienation, wow.
Yeah, they are reasoning in a way that is fundamentally disconnected from their cultural worldview.
So they're fighting their own intuition.
Precisely. As a result, they might become excellent technicians. You know, they can operate the machinery, run the standard lab tests, follow the protocols perfectly.
But they hit a ceiling.
Exactly. They struggle to become groundbreaking inventors because the underlying logic of the system they're forced to use doesn't match the intuitive logic of their upbringing.
So it's not necessarily that the author is saying Western science is fundamentally broken, but more that it's an operating system that just doesn't natively support the software of the African inventive genius.
That's it. Exactly.
It's literally like trying to run a beautifully designed Mac program on a Windows PC. The PC is totally fine, the software is fine, but they aren't speaking the same foundational language, so everything just lags and crashes.
That Mac and Windows analogy perfectly captures the systemic mismatch the author is describing here.
It really helped me wrap my head around it.
And if the operating system is different, we eventually have to look at the underlying code, which in this case is the logic itself. But before we dive into that source code, we have to look at the other 2 justifications for African science, because they raise the stakes significantly.
Yeah, the text gets pretty intense here.
It does. The second reason the author argues we need African science is environmental.
The global scale stuff.
Yes. The text makes a rather sweeping claim that Western science's approach to the world has directly created massive existential environmental crises.
Right. It points specifically to natural disasters, global warming, massive tsunamis, things that threaten the whole globe.
And this leads directly into the third justification, which is the global energy crisis.
And the text gets highly specific here.
Very specific. It points directly to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster and the 2011 Fukushima meltdown in Japan.
Two of the most terrifying events in modern history.
Exactly. The argument is that Western science relies on incredibly dangerous, hyper-complex technologies. The text uses the concept of fusion as a metaphor here.
Fusion. Got it.
Right, it says Western science uses this dangerous fusion that ends up threatening human existence when it inevitably fails.
Because it's so volatile.
Yes. African science, by contrast, favors what the author calls fission of the grand substance.
Okay, wait. I need to clarify something for the listener.
Mm.
When we say fusion and fission in this context, we aren't talking strictly about literal nuclear physics here.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Because literal nuclear fission is what caused the Chernobyl meltdown.
Right, we absolutely need to clarify that. The text is using these terms conceptually, philosophically.
Okay, good. So what do they mean conceptually?
In this philosophical framework, Western fusion represents the aggressive forcing together of disparate elements to create immense volatile power.
Like smashing atoms together.
Conceptually, yes. It's an unnatural synthesis that requires massive containment and control. You have to build these huge, dangerous facilities. And when containment breaches, it's catastrophic.
It poisons the earth for centuries.
Exactly. Now, the African concept of fission here refers to a gentle, eco-friendly breaking down, or an unwrapping, of the natural grand substance of the universe to access the energy that is naturally provided.
Unwrapping. I like that word.
Yeah, it thrives on simplicity, harmony, and low-risk extraction. It works with nature, not against it.
That distinction completely changes how you view the goal of a laboratory. It actually reminds me of the text's critique of Francis Bacon.
Oh, yes. Bacon is considered one of the primary fathers of the modern Western scientific method.
Right, and the text brings up Bacon's incredibly aggressive language. It's actually kind of shocking to read today.
It is very militant.
Bacon basically advocated that scientists need to put nature on a rack and torture her till she reveals her secrets.
Literally violent imagery.
It's this incredibly combative, dominating posture. Western science, historically, is about conquering nature, taming the wild, building a dam to stop the river.
The dominance.
Yeah. But if I'm understanding this alternative framework correctly, African science views humanity not as a conqueror of nature, but as just a small node within a massive interconnected system.
A participant, not a master.
Right. You don't put nature on a rack. You negotiate with it.
Yeah.
You cooperate.
Precisely. If your foundational worldview is that nature is something to be dominated and extracted from, you build a science of forceful fusion.
And if your worldview is that you must maintain equilibrium with nature to just survive, you build a science of harmonious fission.
That is the core difference.
Which brings us back to the operating system.
Yes, the code.
Right. If the worldview is that fundamentally different, how did that actually change the code of the science? How do we get from just cooperating with nature to a completely different set of mathematical or logical rules?
To explain that mechanism, the text introduces something called the ontological quadrant.
The ontological quadrant. Sounds very sci-fi.
It does, but it's actually a very clean, step-by-step philosophical progression. It states that a culture's worldview directly determines its ontology.
And for anyone who hasn't taken Philosophy 101 in a while, ontology is basically the study of what actually exists, what is real.
Exactly, the categorization of reality. So worldview determines ontology. Ontology then dictates the thought system. And finally, the thought system produces the logic.
Okay, so let's track the Western OS through that quadrant just to see how it works.
Sure.
The Western worldview is largely materialist and conquer-driven, as we discussed.
Yes.
Its ontology says only physical things are real. Its thought system is strictly empirical, and therefore its logic is bivalent, two-valued.
Spot on. The law of non-contradiction. A statement is either true or false. It absolutely cannot be both.
A switch is on or it is off. The bone in the X-ray is broken or it is not.
Exactly.
But the African logic, man, this is where my brain really started to bend.
It's a massive leap.
The text says African logic is three-valued.
It is. Now, for the listeners who might be familiar with advanced mathematics or logic, we need to draw a very sharp distinction here before we move on.
Right, because Western philosophy does actually have some three-valued logic systems, doesn't it?
It does. The most famous is probably Lukasiewicz's logic, which was developed in the 1920s.
Could you give a quick explain it like I'm five overview of Lukasiewicz, just so we have a baseline?
Certainly. So, in a standard Western bivalent system, if I say, it will rain tomorrow, that statement is evaluated as either currently true or currently false, even if we don't know the answer yet.
Right.
Jan Lukasiewicz realized this creates philosophical issues with determinism, so he created a third value, undetermined or possible.
Okay.
So in his system, the values are true, false, and unknown. It essentially means the truth value is pending, we just don't have the data yet.
Okay, so it's like a coin flipping in the air.
Great analogy.
While it's in the air, it's not heads or tails yet.
Ah.
It's undetermined. That makes perfect sense to my Western-trained brain, but that is not what the African three-valued logic is doing, is it?
No, it is fundamentally radically different.
Okay, lay it on me.
In African logic, the three values are true, false, and complemented.
Complemented.
Yes, and complemented does not mean undetermined or pending.
So what does it mean?
In African logic, complemented means a state of being both true and false at the exact same time.
Okay. I have to be honest, I am pushing back hard on this.
I expected nothing less.
How can something be both true and false? If I am holding a rock in my hand right now, it is either in my hand, which is true, or it is not in my hand, which is false. It literally cannot be both. It violates everything we understand about reality. How does this actually work in a scientific setting?
It feels like a violation because you are applying a bivalent ontology to a trivalent system.
You're saying I'm using the wrong OS again.
Exactly. To understand how something can be both true and false, we have to go back to the African ontology we discussed earlier.
The wider net.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember, in this framework, reality is not just physical. It consists of the physical, which is matter, the non-physical, which is spirit or subnature, and the dynamic interaction between the two.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
The complemented value represents this interaction. It represents the universe in its natural, unobserved, harmonious state.
Unobserved.
Yes. The text calls this the complementary mode. It is a state of perfection where seemingly contradictory realities freely complement each other without any friction.
So they exist together perfectly.
Right. In the grand metaphysical picture, opposing forces balance out. It is only when you take a piece of reality and force it into what the author calls a contextual mode.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning you isolate it in a specific, real-world physical context. It's only then that it fragments and becomes definitively true or definitively false.
Okay, let me see if I can map this onto something tangible because it's so abstract.
Please do.
It almost sounds like quantum mechanics. Like Schrodinger's cat.
That's a very helpful bridge to use.
So before you open the box, the cat is in a quantum superposition. It is mathematically both alive and dead at the same time?
Yes.
So that is its complementary mode. It's both true and false. But the moment you open the box, the moment you introduce a specific physical context and a human observer, the superposition collapses.
And the cat becomes definitively alive or definitively dead.
Right. It enters the contextual mode. Is that close to what this logic is describing?
It is remarkably close. The text uses two specific logical terms to describe the mechanics of how this truth collapse happens: paracontingent and wedged implication.
Break those down for me because those terms were incredibly dense in the book.
They are heavy terms.
What does paracontingent actually mean in a practical, everyday sense?
In Western logic, true statements are generally considered necessary and absolute. If the statement, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, is true, Western science treats it as a universal, unbending law.
Right. Anywhere on Earth at sea level.
But African logic is paracontingent. This means truths are necessary, but they are absolutely dependent on the unseen, subnatural environment.
The metaphysical context.
Exactly. If you move an experiment to a different physical or spiritual location, the unseen metaphysical variables might change. Therefore, the physical truth value might change. The truth is contingent upon a larger, unseen reality.
So truth isn't a fixed destination. It's a moving target, depending on the environment you're standing in.
Exactly.
And what about wedged implication? What is the wedge?
Wedged implication means that in this logic system, premise A does not directly imply conclusion B in a vacuum.
Okay.
There is always a wedge between them, a mediating context. You cannot simply say, If I drop this glass, A, it will break, B.
Because you don't know the full context.
Right. You have to say, if I drop this glass and the metaphysical and physical context of this specific room allows it, then it will break.
The context is the wedge.
Exactly.
This brings to mind that wonderful visual analogy the author uses. I love this part. If you're trying to grasp why African thinkers naturally default to 3 values instead of 2,
Yeah.
you just have to look at the traditional cooking pot.
Ah, yes, the 3-legged pot. It's brilliant.
Across many African cultures, traditionally, women cook using this heavy pot that is supported over the fire by exactly 3 stones or stands.
Right.
It provides perfect, unshakable stability on uneven ground. And the author points out the sheer philosophical poetry of this.
It's deeply ingrained in the culture.
An African logician looks at the Western bivalent system, which insists reality balances on only 2 pillars, true and false, and thinks, how is that even possible?
It makes no sense to them.
Right. In their everyday life, everything from their meals to their community's structures is supported by 3 pillars. 2 pillars would just tip over. You'd spill the soup.
It's a beautiful grounding of highly abstract philosophy into daily physical reality.
It is beautiful. But I have to play the skeptic again.
Go for it.
If you're listening to this and you're, say, a chemist or an engineer, you might be thinking, okay, cultural poetry is great. Schrodinger's cat is a super fun thought experiment. But how does knowing that a chemical reaction is both true and false in the complementary mode actually help me synthesize a vaccine in a laboratory?
All right, where's the practical application?
Exactly. How is this practical?
That is the essential question, and it's where this text firmly moves from philosophy into hardcore alternative science.
Okay, show me the science.
For the African scientist operating in this system, you literally cannot get a complete, practical, predictive picture of reality in the lab without accounting for that third value.
The complemented value.
Yes.
Oh.
That third value, the complemented state, is the mathematical placeholder for the subnatural world. It is non-matter.
So they are literally mathematically factoring the metaphysical into their lab equations.
Exactly. If you only measure true and false, if you only measure the physical temperature, the chemical composition, the weight of the substance, your experiment is fundamentally incomplete.
You were trying to balance the pot on 2 stones.
You're going to spill the soup.
Yeah.
You have to factor in the specific metaphysical context, the unseen wedge, to accurately predict how that chemical reaction will behave in the real world outside the controlled lab environment.
Okay. If the physical and the metaphysical are literally intertwining on the laboratory table like that, that means we have to completely throw out our standard definitions of what physical stuff even is.
We do. We have to start from scratch.
Because the text goes on to completely dismantle how we understand space, matter, and antimatter.
It completely redefines the vocabulary of physics.
Let's start with the concept of space, because this blew my mind.
In Western physics, we spend a massive amount of time grappling with the vacuum, empty space.
The void between stars or the void between atoms?
Right. But the African scientific perspective presented here makes a radical claim. Space is never empty.
Never.
Never. In fact, empty space simply does not exist.
If it's not empty, what is it?
The text argues that space is simply an intangible property characterizing extended objects.
Okay, you're going to have to translate that for me.
Think of it like a shadow.
A shadow.
A shadow isn't a thing you can pick up and put in a jar, right? It's just a property created by a physical object blocking light.
Okay, I can see that.
In this framework, space is just the relational property of matter existing.
So space doesn't exist independently out there in the universe? It only exists because matter exists to create the concept of distance between 2 points.
Exactly. No matter, no space.
Okay, I can almost wrap my head around that, but then
Yeah.
the author redefines matter and antimatter. And this is where I had to literally read the paragraph 3 times just to make sure my eyes were working.
It is a massive, disorienting inversion of our standard senses.
Okay, let me lay this out for the listener.
Yeah.
The text defines matter as anything that can be felt but not seen in its pure state.
Right.
And it defines antimatter as anything that can be seen but not felt in its pure state.
Yes.
Let me just repeat that because it's so counterintuitive. In this science, pure matter is entirely invisible, and pure antimatter is what we actually see.
It completely flips the script on how we trust our sensory input.
Please explain the mechanics of this. How can the heavy oak table I'm knocking my hand on right now be invisible?
The author illustrates this with what he calls the calabash experiments.
A calabash being a hollowed-out gourd used as a container or a bowl in many African cultures.
Right. So imagine a seemingly empty calabash sitting on a table in front of you. Western common sense and Western physics would say that calabash is filled with empty space, or at most it's filled with air molecules.
Right.
But in this African scientific framework, because space is never empty, that calabash is actually completely full of pure invisible matter.
Okay, it's packed with invisible matter.
Now the experiment. You take a heavy solid iron ball and you drop it into the calabash.
Cool.
Western physics says the ball simply occupies the empty space that was there. But this framework argues something entirely different.
What does it argue?
It argues that because the calabash was already totally full of invisible matter, an amount of invisible matter exactly equal to the mass of that iron ball must physically escape the calabash to make room for it.
It's like dropping a rock into a glass filled to the brim with water. The water spills over the edge onto the table.
Exactly. But here, the water is invisible baseline matter.
The author calls this concept matter-strife, right?
Yes, matter-strife.
Yeah.
It's almost like an evolutionary survival of the fittest, but applied strictly to physical mass.
So the heavier stuff wins.
Always. The heavier, more solid matter always wins the territorial dispute.
The text gives another example of matter-strife with water and iron.
That's a great illustration.
If you have a calabash completely packed with an iron bar and you pour water over it, the water just runs off the sides. It literally cannot dislodge the iron because iron has a higher weight and solidity. It wins the strife.
Right.
But if you have a calabash full of water and you drop a heavy iron bar in, the iron violently forces the water out. The heavier matter asserts its dominance.
Now, here is where this theory goes on the offensive against modern Western physics.
Oh, the CERN critique. I love this.
The author uses this specific concept of matter and antimatter to critique the billion-dollar experiments happening at places like CERN, specifically the ALICEA collaboration.
The CERN alpha experiments. For context for you listening, this is where Western physicists are actually creating a magnetically trapping anti-hydrogen, right? Antimatter.
Yes, actual antimatter, and the core tenet of Western particle physics regarding antimatter is annihilation.
Violent destruction.
Exactly. If a particle of matter touches its exact corresponding particle of antimatter, they instantly destroy each other in a massive burst of pure energy.
Which is why trapping antimatter at CERN requires those incredibly complex magnetic fields. They have to keep it suspended so it doesn't touch the walls of the physical container.
Right. But Dr. Chimakanom's text says that this entire Western view is highly presumptive and deeply flawed.
How so?
The African science perspective argues that matter and antimatter do not annihilate each other at all.
They don't explode.
No. In fact, they desperately need each other to be observed in the physical world. They cohabit. They collaborate.
Okay, walk me through how they cohabit, because this goes back to the whole invisible matter concept, right?
Yes. Think of pure matter as the physical substance that gives an object its weight, its density, its tactile reality.
The stuff I can feel.
Exactly. You can feel it, but in its pure state, it has absolutely no visual properties. It is invisible. Pure antimatter, on the other hand, is the visual property. It is light, it is color, it is visual boundary and presence, but it has zero physical mass. You can't touch it.
So they combine to make the objects we interact with every single day.
Exactly. Antimatter is literally the pigmentation that allows us to see matter.
Pigmentation.
Yes. When you look at the wooden table in front of you, you are feeling the pure matter with your knuckles when you knock on it, but you are seeing the antimatter contamination that gives the wood its brown color and its visual edges.
That is just a staggering way to view reality.
It takes a minute to adjust to.
Let me test a hypothetical to see if I truly grasped it. Let's talk about a pane of clear glass.
Okay, good test.
If I'm looking through a clear glass window, I can't see the glass itself, but I can definitely feel it if I press my hand against it. In this framework, a pane of clear glass is an element that is highly resistant to antimatter contamination.
Yes.
It is mostly pure matter. It lacks the pigmentation, so it remains completely invisible to my eye, but it's totally solid to my touch.
That is a flawless application of the logic. You nailed it.
And wait, let me take it a step further. Think about military technology, like thermal binoculars or specialized radar that lets a soldier see through a solid brick wall.
Oh, that is interesting.
In Western terms, we say the technology is penetrating the wall with electromagnetic waves, right?
Right.
But in this African framework, we haven't made the wall disappear. We've just used technology to temporarily bypass the wall's antimatter pigmentation.
Exactly.
We've literally stripped away its visual camouflage so our eyes can perceive the pure, invisible matter hiding behind it.
It works perfectly. It reframes the entirety of optics and material science.
But hold on, I just realized a gap here.
What's that?
If matter is what we feel, and antimatter is what we see, and together they make up basically everything in the physical world, we're missing something.
We are.
We established in the previous section that this is a three-valued system. The pot needs three legs to stand. What is the third leg of the physical universe?
The third leg is what the author calls non-matter.
Non-matter. We touched on this briefly earlier. This is the subnatural world.
Yes, or, as the author provocatively translates it for a strict scientific context, thought.
Thought, like human thought. As a physical component of the universe.
Well, as a highly active component, yes. Non-matter is a subnatural, boundless entity. It does not exist within our physical space-time continuum.
Okay, so it's outside our dimension.
Right. It has no mass, so you can't feel it.
Yeah.
And no visual pigmentation, so you can't see it.
So what does it do?
This is the crux of the entire system. Non-matter is the ultimate cause of all physical motion.
All motion.
Yes. Matter and antimatter are essentially dormant on their own. They just sit there. They only move, interact, or change states when they are actively acted upon by non-matter, by thought.
Okay, so we've established the what of African science. We have this incredibly robust three-tiered reality: matter, which we feel, antimatter, which we see, and non-matter or thought, which causes them to actually move and interact.
That's the architect.
That is a beautifully constructed theoretical universe.
Yeah.
But a science isn't just a theory, it's a methodology.
Exactly. You have to be able to test it.
Right. How do you actually study a universe where thought is the primary engine of motion? How do you measure that in a lab?
You need a highly specific set of tools. The author systematizes 4 primary methods of African scientific inquiry.
Yeah, let's hear them.
And these aren't just abstract ideas. They are historical practices that have been categorized into a formal, rigorous framework. The 4 methods are akonwali, akoimeobi, akoijuas, and akonyiri onwe.
Let's break those down, because the examples in the book show exactly how an African scientist operates in the field.
Let's start with the first one, akonwali, which translates roughly to trial and error.
Now, trial and error sounds pretty basic to a Western listener, but the text gives a historical anecdote that shows how deeply contextual it really is in this system.
And it's a great story.
It's the story of building the first bridge over the Idomili River.
Yes, the fast-moving river separating a specific community from the vital Onitsha market. They needed to cross it to trade.
Right. So attempt 1. The local engineers decide to use long timber logs, which is standard bridge building material everywhere.
Very standard.
But they find out the hard way that the only wood long enough to span the gap quickly rots in the specific swampy conditions of that riverbank. So the bridge completely fails.
Right.
Attempt 2. They try a different, more Western-style approach. They try driving heavy pillars directly into the riverbed to support shorter logs.
A brute force approach.
Exactly. But the Idomili River is just too fast. The current literally washes the heavy timber away.
Yeah.
Attempt 2 fails.
So what do they do?
Attempt 3. They completely abandon the concept of heavy wood. They study the environment, they build high earth embankments on the sides, and they use woven raffia. The text calls it ukpa.
And raffia is incredibly light, very flexible, and naturally water-resistant.
Exactly. And they wove it with high arm rails so people wouldn't fall into the fast water.
Yeah.
And it succeeded brilliantly. Now, why is this specific story the exemplar of Akonwali? Why isn't it just regular engineering?
Because it illustrates a form of trial and error that is deeply, fundamentally submissive to the environment.
Submissive.
Yes. In a Western approach, if the wood rots, a scientist might try to invent a toxic chemical coating to force the wood to survive the swamp.
Or pour concrete.
Right. They try to conquer the environment to make their pre-existing theory work.
The fusion approach.
Yes. The African method of Akronwali observes the failure, accepts the environment's veto without fighting it, and completely changes the material to harmonize with the specific context. You don't force the river to accept wood, you find what the river will naturally tolerate.
It's the fission approach over the fusion approach.
Exactly.
Okay, the second method is akoimeobi, or interscience. I found this one completely fascinating because it views the human mind itself as a precision production machine.
It does. Introscience relies on deep, sustained internal reflection to solve physical, external problems.
The example the author uses here is the invention of a traditional palm oil processor.
I love this example.
It's so relatable. A man wants to extract the highly durable, valuable red oil from palm fruits rather than the quick-spoiling orange oil.
Right.
So he builds a mechanical press. He puts the raw palm fruits in, cranks it down, and it fails. He gets the wrong oil.
Strike one.
So he tries fermenting the fruits first. He waits days, puts them in the press, and it's a failure again.
Strike two.
And this trial and error goes on for months. The text even notes that his wife is complaining that he's wasting the entire season's harvest.
A very human detail to include in a serious science text.
Right. I love that. So, one evening, he's taking a break. He's sitting by the fire, simply eating some palm fruits that had been roasted in the coals.
Just having a smack.
As he's chewing the cooked fruit, he has this massive internal aha moment. The mind connects the internal sensory experience of eating to the external mechanical problem of the press.
The intrascience kicks in.
Yes, he realizes the physical composition of the fruit changes with heat. He runs back, cooks the fruits, crushes them, and then he actually fries the mash before pressing it.
And it works perfectly.
He extracts the red oil.
The key to Akoime Obi here is that the breakthrough didn't come from running 100 external variables on a spreadsheet in a lab.
No.
It came from internalizing the physical properties of the material through deep, quiet, lived experience. The mind simulated the solution before his hands ever built it.
But here is where my Western training starts really screaming at me.
Uh-oh.
The text points out that introscience treats every single problem as utterly unique. You don't generalize.
Correct.
If I figure out how to extract palm oil using heat and pressure, the Western method says, great, write that down as a universal law of oil extraction, and let's go apply it to coconuts and olives and everything else.
Build a massive factory.
Yes. But Akoke says no. The coconut is a completely different metaphysical context.
Yeah.
You have to start the internal reflection all over again for the coconut.
You are identifying the exact friction point between the two systems.
It just seems wildly inefficient. It's like reinventing the wheel every single time you want to build a cart. Why on earth wouldn't you generalize to save time?
Because generalizing assumes a bivalent, uniform reality. If you believe reality is three-valued and highly contingent on unseen metaphysical contexts, generalizing is actually dangerous.
How so?
What works for the palm fruit might actively cause an explosion when applied to the coconut because the subnatural variables are totally different. You can't assume the wedge is the same.
Okay, that makes internal logical sense, even if it totally frustrates my modern desire for speed and mass production.
It prioritizes safety and harmony over speed.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now let's move to the third method, because this is where things get truly, truly wild.
Buckle up.
Akoya says, or interscience. This is where the metaphysical explicitly becomes a literal laboratory tool.
Yes. This is perhaps the most difficult method for a strictly Western mind to accept as quote-unquote science, but the text treats it with absolute rigor.
It doesn't flinch.
No. Interscience is the practice of actively establishing a link with akaramuo, which we defined earlier as thought, or non-matter.
The text describes a traditional healer who is presented with a brand new, totally unknown disease in the village.
A crisis situation.
All right. Trial and error akonwali would take way too long. The patient might die while they test herbs.
So what does the healer do?
The healer retreats into an okumuo, and the author translates okumuo literally as laboratory.
It is a secluded physical space specifically designed for entering a highly specific cognitive state.
So the healer goes into this lab, enters a trance state, and interfaces directly with the non-matter.
The subnatural world.
And the text describes this interaction almost like a virtual reality simulation.
It does.
It says the non-matter creates an elliptical motion in the scientist's mind, essentially playing a mental demo video.
A demo video of the cure.
Yes. The healer literally watches this metaphysical video, which shows them exactly which specific combination of forest herbs, tree barks, and roots will cure this specific new disease.
They see the chemical reaction work in the metaphysical space before they try it in the physical space.
Exactly. And then they wake up, walk out of the lab, gather those exact physical herbs, and cure the patient.
And we must emphasize for the listener, within this framework, this is not considered supernatural magic.
That's not a spell.
No, it is considered a highly repeatable, rigorous scientific methodology. The scientist is simply querying a database that happens to be non-material.
The ultimate cloud storage.
Exactly. The non-material world holds the master blueprint of how matter and antimatter interact. The healer is just downloading the data and applying it.
It's basically running a computer simulation of a drug trial, except the computer is the subnatural universe. I am incredibly skeptical of how you practically verify that, but I absolutely understand the logic of how it fits perfectly into their three-tiered world.
It is internally consistent.
It is. Finally, we have the fourth method, equanimity, or science.
Some science relies heavily on sensory images of resemblances and inductive generalization. It is by far the most visually driven of the four methods.
The examples here are fascinating. It's observing that a plantain physically resembles human bone and muscle structure.
The visual similarity.
Right, and therefore deducing that eating plantain will physically fortify bones and muscles.
And another example.
An herbalist observes that a person drinking the juice of the fuliful herb experiences immediate, severe purging.
A physical reaction.
Right. The herbalist uses science to generalize that this specific juice will cause a purging effect in anyone who drinks it, making it a reliable physical cleanse.
Notice how some science actually does allow for some generalization, unlike introscience.
Oh, true. It does.
It looks for physical patterns in the antimatter pigmentation, the visual look of the plantain, the visual reaction of the purging, and infers a reliable physical law from it.
So you have these four distinct methods: trial and error, internal mind simulation, metaphysical data downloading, and visual pattern generalization.
A complete toolkit.
But earlier, I brought up how inefficient it seems to treat every problem as unique. And you hinted that this frustration isn't just a Western critique, it's actually a massive debate inside African science itself.
Oh, yes. African science is absolutely not a monolith.
It has factions.
Just like Western physics has massive internal debates. I mean, think of Einstein famously arguing with Niels Bohr about quantum mechanics. African science is split into two major competing schools of thought regarding the absolute nature of reality.
The mechanists versus the transcendentalists.
Exactly. This is the great philosophical schism in the text. Let's look at the transcendentalists first.
Okay.
This school believes that the ultimate goal of science is indeed to describe and manipulate the material world. But they explicitly acknowledge that the entire non-material world, the realm of non-matter and thought, is ruled by a supreme entity. Yes. They call this entity Chiuku, which translates to the big god, or the ultimate scientist.
The ultimate scientist. So they literally inject a deity directly into the scientific method.
They do. In the transcendentalist school, Chiuku originally created all matter and antimatter. Therefore, all scientific breakthroughs, whether discovered through trial and error or a trance state, are ultimately inspired by Chiuku.
They are gifts from the ultimate scientist.
Precisely. Human scientists are essentially just imitating Chiuku's original perfect designs. Science, in this view, is almost a form of religious devotion. It's the active uncovering of divine craftsmanship.
And then across the aisle, you have the mechanist school. And they sound a lot more like modern atheistic physicists.
They are fiercely secular within their own framework. The mechanists believe the universe is simply uncreated. It has always existed.
No beginning, no end.
Right. They completely reject the idea of deities, gods, or a Chiuku having any place whatsoever in scientific inquiry.
But wait, they still believe in the metaphysical. Right. They still believe in non-matter and thought causing motion.
Yes.
How do they explain that without a god orchestrating it?
They believe that a karamuo thought is simply a naturally occurring force of the universe, much like gravity or electromagnetism.
Oh, okay.
It isn't a conscious god making decisions, it's an ambient energy. The mechanists theorize that this natural thought force activates motion by creating an ethereal pressure.
Ethereal pressure.
Yes, this pressure breaks what they call the discordance force, which then allows matter and antimatter to gel together and form physical reality.
So it's entirely mechanical.
Exactly. It utilizes forces that happen to be metaphysical, but it requires absolutely no divine architect.
This tension leads to my absolute favorite part of the entire book.
The philosophical trap.
Yes, it's a philosophical trap that the mechanists use to attack the transcendentalists. The text calls it the could-not, would-not dilemma. But I love its mythological name.
Amadioha's arrow.
Amadioha's arrow. Amadioha being the traditional Igbo god of thunder.
Right.
And mythology says Amadioha fires an arrow that has an arrowhead at both ends.
A nasty weapon.
Right, so if it hits you and gets stuck in your chest, it doesn't matter if you pull it forward or pull it backward. Either way, the barbs are going to cause massive damage to your internal organs. It is a total no-win scenario.
And how do the mechanists apply this double-headed arrow to the transcendentalist scientists?
The mechanists point out that there are massive mysteries in the universe that human science hasn't solved yet. The text calls these mysteries ephiomimi.
The unknowns.
So the mechanists ask the transcendentalists, You claim Chiyuku is the ultimate scientist who possesses all knowledge and shares it with humans. So why do these unexplainable mysteries still exist?
And here comes the arrow.
Exactly. The mechanist asks, is it because Chiyuku could not explain these complex mysteries to human minds? Or is it because Chiyuku would not explain them?
The dual-headed barbs.
Yes. If you pull the arrow one way and say Chiyuku could not explain it, then you are admitting your ultimate scientist is not all-powerful. He lacks the ability to communicate.
Which destroys the definition of Chiyuku.
Right. But if you pull the arrow the other way and say Chiyuku would not explain it, then you are admitting your God is selfish, withholding, and not a benevolent sharer of scientific knowledge.
Also damaging.
Either way, you pull the arrow, the transcendentalist theory of a perfect divine scientist suffers massive logical damage.
It is a devastating philosophical critique. And for the listener, if this argument sounds vaguely familiar, it's because it maps almost perfectly onto the Epicurean paradox in Western philosophy, the problem of evil.
Remind me how that goes.
Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent.
That is exactly what I was thinking. When I read Amadeu's arrow, I immediately likened the mechanist to modern secular physicists pushing back against intelligent design advocates.
It's the exact same debate.
It's fascinating because it shows how beautifully universal this human debate actually is.
Yeah.
Whether you are in a sterile university laboratory in Europe or debating under a baobab tree in West Africa centuries ago, human beings are having the exact same high-level arguments.
About whether a divine being is pulling the strings of reality, or if it's just the cold, natural mechanics of the universe.
Exactly.
It highlights a deeply shared human intellectual heritage. But if we connect this debate back to the bigger picture of African science, what is truly significant here is the common ground.
What do you mean?
Regardless of whether a scientist belongs to the transcendentalist school or the mechanist school, regardless of whether they believe in a god or just natural ethereal pressure, both schools agree completely that the metaphysical interacts with the physical.
They both agree on the three-valued logic.
Yes, they both agree on the existence of non-matter, and they both agree that this interaction is governed by a very specific and highly controversial set of laws.
Which brings us to the most notorious part of the text.
The controversial stuff.
The part that bridges the gap between science and what the uninitiated observer would absolutely call magic.
Yes. We are talking about the laws, theories, and models of explanation. Specifically, we need to examine the law of the means, or egwegi.
Okay, the law of the means states that every technology, every physical effect has a means of being achieved.
Right.
And often, because of the three-valued logic system we discussed, that means involves metaphysical manipulation. It utilizes ether or vital force or thought pressure.
And this is where African science historically ran into massive, violent public relations problems.
Let's put it mildly.
The author dedicates significant time to discussing what he describes as the African witch hunts that occurred roughly between AD 1000 and 1800.
The historical anecdotes the text provides here are absolutely wild.
They read like fantasy, but they are treated as historical fact in the text.
It describes ancient African physicists who mastered the law of the means to such a degree that they could manipulate the antimatter pigmentation and matter-strife of physical objects.
Well,
The text claims they could literally walk through solid red earth walls.
by fully understanding the porosity of matter and the application of non-matter force.
Right. It claims they could manipulate the ethereal pressure around their bodies to deflect incoming machete blows so the blade wouldn't leave a scar.
Incredible.
It talks about individuals traversing massive physical distances, miles of geography in mere seconds by manipulating space, which, remember, is just a property, not a void.
And it wasn't just physics either, it was chemistry and biology.
Yeah, the text describes chemists who created specific, metaphysically charged substances. If a man applied this substance to his tongue before a village meeting, every single person in the assembly would find themselves violently agreeing with whatever he said.
It altered their cognitive reception.
Mind control paste. There were other substances explicitly engineered to seduce maidens against their normal judgment.
Now, put yourself in the shoes of a layperson. Imagine you are just a regular farmer living in a village between AD 1000 and 1800.
Okay.
You don't understand the three-valued logic. You don't know the complex math behind matter-strife or ethereal pressure.
You're just trying to grow crops.
Right. And you see a man walk through a solid wall, or a man forcefully manipulate the minds of the village elders using a root paste.
You don't think, wow, What an incredible breakthrough in theoretical physics.
Yeah.
You think, that man is a sorcerer and a massive threat to our safety.
Exactly. Because the practitioners of this high-level science blurred the line between observable technology and what the public perceived as dark magic, the public turned on them.
Out of fear.
The text argues that centuries of scientific advancement were lost because the masses hunted down and killed the scientists, believing they were literal witches.
So the science was driven underground.
Shrouded in extreme secrecy, yes. Which, tragically, prevented it from developing into a formalized, widely taught academic discipline like Western science did. It was hidden to survive.
Okay, I have to step in here and play the skeptic again.
I was waiting for it.
Walking through walls. Mind control paste. I mean, to a modern listener, this sounds exactly like the mythology the author claimed he wasn't writing about in the introduction.
It stretches credulity.
How does the text anchor these wild claims into anything resembling a modern systematic scientific model?
That is exactly the heavy lifting the author attempts in the final chapters of the book. He introduces 3 formal models of explanation.
Okay.
These models are designed to give modern African scientists a rigorous framework to study these phenomena without resorting to the word magic. They are trying to mathematicalize the metaphysical.
Let's go through these models because the names alone are pretty intimidating.
They are. The first is the integrative humanism model, or IHM.
IHM.
This model views all of reality as a massive web of reality, or MWR. It explicitly goes to war against Western reductionism.
Oh, so?
The text actually quotes the famous Western philosopher David Hume here. Hume notoriously said that if you take any book of divinity or metaphysics, you should commit it to the flames, because it contains nothing but sophistry and illusion.
The ultimate bivalent empirical arrogance. If I can't measure it with my ruler, burn it.
Exactly. The integrative humanism model says, no, do not burn the book. It argues that to understand the massive web of reality, you need inductive, reductive, and deductive inference, all combined with what the author calls a demonstrable faith protocol.
A demonstrable faith protocol.
You have to logically accept the unseen strands of the web to understand why the visible spider moves the way it does.
Okay, I like the spider analogy. What's the second model?
The second model is Igioma's model of harmony of contraries, or IMHC.
This one feels a bit more grounded to me.
It dictates that every single being, every object, must maintain a strict equilibrium of its physical and spiritual constitution.
It's the complemented state we talked about earlier, but applied as an active scientific model.
Yes. The example it gives is taking a heavy hammer and smashing a physical stone.
Okay.
In Western science, you are simply fracturing calcium and minerals. But under the IMHC model, you aren't just breaking matter, you are causing a violent disequilibrium in the stone's physical and spiritual constitution.
You are altering its metaphysical blueprint. And the third model?
The third is Isuzu's Ibuanyadanda model, or AM.
I absolutely love the analogy for this one. It uses the concept of the danda.
The danda is a specific species of highly gregarious cooperative ant found in Africa.
Right. And the model argues that just like one single danda ant cannot carry a heavy piece of food back to the colony alone, it requires the coordinated effort of dozens of ants' empirical physical tools cannot explain the heavy load of the universe alone.
They are insufficient.
A microscope is just one ant. A telescope is one ant. They are incredibly useful, but they must be complemented by the metaphysical tools of intro-science and inner science to actually move the payload of truth.
That's a perfect summary. And all 3 of these models, the massive web, the harmony of contraries, and the danda ant, point toward the ultimate crowning theory of scientific truth in African science.
The big finale.
It is called the theory of Amasi-Amasi.
Amasi-Amasi. The text translates this roughly to the idea that the universe is fundamentally, ultimately incomprehensible in its totality.
Yes. It is formalized as the principle of best possible explanation.
I have to say, out of everything in this dense, wild book, this principle is absolutely my favorite.
It's very profound.
Because isn't it beautifully, profoundly humbling? Think about Western physics right now.
Oh, the ego.
Right. The greatest minds, from Einstein to string theorists today, are all completely obsessed with finding the absolute theory of everything. They want a single, elegant mathematical equation that explains gravity, quantum mechanics, dark matter, the whole universe tied up with a neat bow.
The ultimate pursuit of a final, unchangeable, true value.
Exactly. But African science,
Yeah.
through the principle of Amasi-Amasi, looks at that pursuit and says, you are chasing a ghost.
It's impossible.
It accepts that the universe is in a state of constant three-valued motion. The metaphysical context is always shifting. The unseen variables are always breathing.
Reality is alive.
Because of that, you can never lock the universe into one final equation. The best a scientist can ever do, the absolute pinnacle of scientific achievement, is to provide the best possible explanation for that specific contextual moment in time.
It completely removes the arrogance from the scientific endeavor. It dictates that scientific theories are never eternal absolutes. They are merely functional, temporary models that work within specific contexts.
And when the context shifts,
When the metaphysical or physical context inevitably shifts, the scientist must have the humility to let the old theory die and adapt a new one.
it requires a profound intellectual flexibility.
And that humility, that deep, baked-in adaptability, might be exactly what the modern global world needs as we face increasingly complex, unpredictable crises that our rigid, bivalent technologies seem unable to solve.
Okay, let's take a deep breath. We have covered a massive amount of philosophical ground today.
A huge amount.
We started by challenging the absolute authority of the Western scientific method and the X-ray machine. We explored the mind-bending reality of a three-valued logic system: true, false, and complemented.
The three-legged pot.
We redefined space as a property, matter as invisible, and antimatter as the visual pigmentation that allows us to see the world.
The calabash experiments.
We looked at how scientists use trial and error, internal mental simulations, and metaphysical trance states to extract data from non-matter. And we navigated the great philosophical debate between the mechanists and the transcendentalists.
It is a breathtakingly comprehensive system of thought.
But as we always do on this show, we have to ask the ultimate question: so what?
Right, why does it matter?
Why does this matter to you, the listener, today? Dr. Chimamand's conclusion to this text is incredibly pointed. This entire book is not just an academic exercise meant to sit on a dusty library shelf.
No, it is a call to action.
It is. The text argues that if we want African scientists to truly excel, if we want them to contribute massive world-saving innovations to global civilization, they must be allowed and funded to think, invent, and theorize within their native thought systems.
The author brings up a fantastic real-world example here, Philip Emeagwali.
Oh, right. The computer scientist.
Yes, he is the brilliant Nigerian computer scientist who essentially invented the formula that allowed supercomputers to talk to each other, which paved the way for the early internet.
An absolute pioneer.
Bill Clinton famously praised him as one of the great minds of the information age. Emeagwali is the proof of concept. He used his innate contextual connective logic to see a massive web of processors where Western thinkers just saw isolated machines.
The text argues that for the continent of Africa to produce 1,000 more Philip Emeagwalis, the educational system has to change.
Fundamentally changed.
Scientists cannot just be trained to act as highly skilled technicians operating a Western scientific OS that doesn't natively fit their worldview. There needs to be a fundamental educational revolution.
Scientific knowledge must be rooted in the cultural logic of the people producing it.
Exactly. The tools of discovery must match the hands of the discoverer.
It's profound.
It is. And it leaves us with a final, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over as we wrap up today.
I like slightly uncomfortable thoughts.
Somewhere in the middle of the text, the author drops this incredibly poetic line. He writes that nature is like a dream, it is flexible, and truth about it is the way you see it.
A deeply radical statement for a science textbook.
Truly. But think about what we've discussed today. If the very rules of logic, whether a switch is strictly on or off, or if it can be both, and if the definitions of physical matter and the acceptable methods of inquiry in a laboratory,
If all that is contingent.
yes, if all of these things are deeply, inextricably tied to the specific cultural thought system we happen to be raised in, it forces you to look in the mirror.
It forces a massive reevaluation of our own certainties.
Right, so I ask you, the listener, what absolute scientific truths do you hold tightly to today? What unbreakable laws of reality do you trust implicitly, simply because your specific educational system told you they were facts?
Are they absolute?
Because after reading this deep dive into African science, you have to wonder, are those absolute truths actually universal? Or are they just the specific antimatter pigmentation of your own limited cultural lens?
A brilliant and truly unsettling question to leave our listeners with. We want to thank you for joining us and for keeping an open mind as we ventured into the profound and paradigm-shifting world of African science.
Keep questioning the X-rays, everyone. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.